Hatman Strikes Back, Daily Boxing News. Hello, hi, welcome. In this video, I want to talk about this rumor that Matchroom, Eddie Hearn's company, is worth £1 billion. Now, this was something that Simon Jordan said on TalkSport. He said someone he knows and trusts, who's presumably in big business or associated with, either did the valuation themselves or they know the person that did it. Whatever the case may be, a lot of people who know nothing about business will hear a figure like that and say, well, Matchroom must be unstoppable then. This notion that Hatman's been putting out there, that they're somehow on the decline, is obviously complete nonsense. How can a business worth £1 billion be on the decline? Well, first of all, it's a ridiculous question to ask. If you look at the biggest businesses in the world, the most giant corporations, they have peaks and troughs over the years. It's not a completely exponential trajectory upwards. No, they go up and down. But going up and down doesn't mean that you're gonna go from being a multi-billion-dollar corporation to going bust. That's not what I'm saying. That's never what I said about Matchroom. I said Matchroom were at a peak a few years ago, and now they're going into a bit of a trough. And I said they may come back up to a peak in future. So let's address this valuation of £1 billion. Well, first of all, it's for the whole of Matchroom, not just their boxing division. You do realize that they've got multiple divisions. Boxing is just one of them. Secondly, there are multiple ways to value a business. For those of you who don't know anything about business, let me tell you what they are. The first is net book value. This method calculates the value of a business by subtracting its total liabilities from its total assets as shown on its balance sheet. Number two, discontinued cash flow analysis. This method estimates the present value of a business's future cash flow, taking into account factors like inflation, risk, and time value of money. Number three, comparable analysis. This method compares a business's metrics, for example, revenue, earnings, and market share, to those of similar companies in the same industry to determine its value. Number four, enterprise value. This method calculates a business's value by multiplying its earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization by a multiple such as the price to earnings ratio. Number five, present value of a growing perpetuity formula. This method calculates a business's value by discounting its expected future cash flows to the present, assuming a perpetual growth rate. Number six, asset-based approach. This method values a business by adding up the value of its individual assets, such as property, equipment, and intellectual property. And number seven, price to earnings ratio. This method calculates a business's value by dividing its stock price by its earnings per share. So there are multiple ways to value a business, and the figure you put on it can vary drastically depending on which method you use. In some cases, you're going to be taking into account how much money is flowing through the business. In the case of Matchroom, where do they get their money from? Most of it comes from DAZN, the television network that they've got to deal with. We know that DAZN did a $1 billion deal with Eddie Hearn. He had a $1 billion budget when he first started out with DAZN. That was heavily publicized. And now he's doing shows with the Saudis. He's getting a big cut whenever one of his fighters fights on a Saudi show. Combine that with the other divisions that Matchroom have, the $1 billion figure may be the amount of money that's flowing through the business, not to be confused with the amount of profit they're making. And as I explained earlier on, just because your business is worth £1 billion or dollars, that doesn't mean that your business isn't going into a trough. You might have been worth 1.2 last year, and now you're only worth $1 billion. At the same time, it can be a case where last year you were worth 500 million, this year you're worth $1 billion, but actually you're not making any more profit than you were last year. You've just received a load of investment. You've got loads more assets, right? And that's another thing. Depending on how you value Matchroom, you're taking into account the fighters that they have under contract. It wasn't so long ago that Canelo was one of the fighters that Matchroom had under contract. So if you valued their business at that time, it would have included the amount of money that Canelo's bringing to the table. So I wouldn't get too caught up on this £1 billion or dollar figure regarding what Matchroom is worth, because something like a promotional company in boxing, because of the nature of the business, is going to inevitably have a lot of peaks and troughs. It's not going to be a perfectly upward trajectory. No, it's not. Look at Frank Warren and how long he's been in the game. Has it been a perfectly upward trajectory for him since he started in boxing? Of course it hasn't. His career has been ups and downs, highs and lows. He was in the wilderness for years. during the Box Nation period. And that's after being the top promoter in Britain for many, many, many decades. He basically ran Barry Hearn, Eddie's dad, out of boxing. Barry couldn't keep up with the competition. And by the way, I'm not some Frank Warren fanboy here, folks, in case you've never heard me talk about promoters before. For many years, I was extremely critical of Frank Warren, not just because of his backward approach to boxing promotion, but also because of the way that he's treated fighters over the years. I did many, many, many videos criticizing him, and because of that, people were accusing me of actually working for Matchroom. I've never met Eddie Hearn in my life, nor have I ever worked for Matchroom, never taken a penny from him, never had a conversation with Matchroom. But there you go, that's the mind of some people. They can't get to grips with the concept of objective criticism. So when I talk about Frank Warren and the way he's treated fighters over the years, it's not coming from a place of me having an agenda to slag him off and big up Eddie Hearn because I'm pro Matchroom. No, I'm coming from the perspective of a boxing fan and somebody who wants to see fighters treated fairly and treated well. So if it's Frank Warren mistreating fighters or Eddie Hearn mistreating fighters or Bob Arum or Don King, doesn't matter to me. They're in the wrong, whoever they are. Same goes for the fortunes of their businesses. If I see Frank Warren's business going down, I'm going to say his business is going down. If I see his business going up, I'm going to say that too. Same goes for Eddie Hearn. I just say what I see. I'm like catchphrase, folks. So anyone thinking I've got some type of agenda against Eddie Hearn, you're an idiot. I've got no agenda against him at all. In fact, during the years that Eddie Hearn was still with Sky Sports, on multiple occasions in multiple videos, I said that Eddie Hearn is the best British boxing promoter that I've ever seen in my life. Bear in mind, when I started watching boxing in the 80s, there was the likes of Mickey Duff. Frank Warren, of course, was trying to come up then. Barry Hearn was in the game. In the Mickey Duff years, you had the Cartel, Jarvis Astaire, etc. Frank Warren did fantastic things, in particular during the 1990s in terms of putting on big shows and what have you. But during Eddie Hearn's Sky years, I was saying that Hearn, in a very short space of time, has eclipsed all of them, in my opinion. I'd never seen a promoter who made himself as accessible as Eddie Hearn before and who was as charismatic as Eddie Hearn before in the UK. But as I say, over the past few years, he's lost some fighters. His heavyweight stable has shrunk down to pretty much just Anthony Joshua, when at one point he had, 20 heavyweights or something? Close to. There was a time when Eddie Hearn controlled the heavyweight division. He was even doing stadium fights with the likes of Kell Brook. It's a far cry from that now. Canelo's gone. AJ, well, we're not sure how long he's going to be continuing on in boxing. It all depends on the results of his fights, right? But he's 34 years of age, so you wouldn't have imagined he's going to be around for too much longer. And apart from AJ, who's Eddie Hearn got that actually sells any tickets? I'll wait. Tell me who actually sells a load of tickets and pay-per-views other than AJ and Eddie Hearn's current stable. Because he used to have multiple guys that could sell pay-per-views. Now he's only got one. How else could you interpret that other than Eddie Hearn's business, the boxing division? Not the other divisions in Matchroom. The boxing division is going into a bit of a trough now. It doesn't mean they're going to end up going bust. It's normal in the boxing game for a promotional company to have peaks and troughs. Anyway, just wanted to get that off my chest because some people can't think their way out of a wet paper bag. They know nothing about business. They don't even know the basics of how a business is actually valued and the things that can dramatically change a business's value from one year to the next, sometimes from 1 month to the next, all depending on which calculation you use. I'll leave it there.